Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum. In today's video, I'll be refuting yet another argument against Hadith preservation, namely anachronisms and prophecies and supernatural events. By the way, anachronism means that if a particular event is happened in a time when it couldn't possibly be known. For example, if supposedly a text claims to be the year 1000, right, and it mentions PlayStation, we would know it is anachronistic because at that time no one could have known PlayStations. That's just one example of what anachronism means. So let's get started on the contention and then the refutation. So here's the contention. There are a lot of later events mentioned in Hadith. Muslims would call them prophecies, but they are generally assumed to be anachronism. They are prophecies related to Umayyad, Abbasids and Khawarij. So these were basically made up basically made up by each group against their enemies. Someone making a true prophecy is beyond unlikely. True ambiguous prophecies stopped being fulfilled by the year 800 when serious Hadith criticism supposedly emerged. So this shows that the earlier prophecies were later made up. The prophecies such as Bedouin Arabs and tall buildings are extremely vague. All this makes general prophecy extremely unlikely, and it is much more likely that these Hadiths were made up and hence Hadiths are not preserved. So let's get started on the refutation. The moron Joshua Little spent 10 to 15 minutes ranting about miracles and prophecies. He was claiming that this is not just an assumption that these things are impossible, that it's an argument that these things are impossible. This moron kept ranting about 10-15 minutes, and he claimed that there is a supposed Steelman version of this argument. He didn't give it. If you watch the video, he just kept ranting on and on about 15 minutes on this point without bothering to make an argument, right? So here's the simple refutation of this point. Probability, likelihood, unlikelihood of something matters given certain assumptions. For example, if you assume naturalism or that God doesn't interfere with the world, right? Miracles will be highly unlikely, close to impossible or impossible. But if you assume God exists and can send prophets and uses prophecies and miracles as a proof for prophethood, then it is not that unlikely. It is certainly possible and plausible that some miracles would happen, right? So probability, likelihood, unlikelihood is based on the assumptions you go in with. So there is no argument here intrinsically showing that these things are impossible or highly implausible. Secondly, this moron was claiming that there are false prophecies after the year 800 when supposed Hadith criticism began. Hadith criticism actually began a long time before that. This clown is lying about that as well. But funny thing is, this moron did not give one example of a false prophecy. Not one example. I mean, that should just show you how pathetic their position is. And he basically claimed that the Bedouin Arabs prophecy is vague. I don't think he didn't want to mention this, but the prophecy is too popular, the Bedouin Arabs prophecy, that they had to give at least some lip service to it. So let's get started on the refutation, right? I'm gonna do three things here. Firstly, we will analyze whether the Bedouin Arabs prophecy is vague or not. Secondly, we will analyze prophecies about deviant sects that were fulfilled after the time of compilation of Hadith. Third, we will analyze some more prophecies of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that were recently fulfilled and see whether they are vague or not. So, this clown was claiming that the Bedouin Arabs prophecy is a vague prophecy, right? At the core of it, this prophecy is actually very simple. The prophecy is stating that a group of people who has been poor for thousands of years will suddenly become rich enough that they will be able to compete in the construction of tall buildings. This is a complete societal shift. It is beyond counterintuitive. There is nothing vague about this prophecy, and this is extremely unlikely to have been made up because of the unlikelihood of it. So this prophecy is not something vague. It's actually a massive proof for the truth of Islam. So we have one example of a vague, clear-cut prophecy after the year 800. So if Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam can make two prophecies about events 1400 years or 1300 years after his time, why can't he make two prophecies about events 50 or 100 years after his time? Think about this point. More than that, I just want to give two prophecies that were recently fulfilled, one in the past century or so, about 100 years ago or so, or second quite recently, right? These prophecies are basically about deviant sects. The first one is about Hadith rejectors. It's actually quite famous one. For someone who's researched prophecies, you would know about this. The second one is about basically liberal type people who try to make, who say that alcohol and homosexuality and silk and musical instruments and things such as this are halal. They are making haram things halal. So these are two different types of deviant groups that happened relatively extremely recently. Now I want you to think a very simple point. Think about a very simple point. If Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam can make two prophecies about deviant groups that were fulfilled 1300 years or 1400 years after his time, why couldn't he have made two prophecies about deviant groups that existed 50 or 100 years after his time? He could have. There is no issue with this. So the claim about anachronisms and prophecies not being prophecies being made up by Muslims against each other just doesn't work, because of this simple reason. Think about this, quite simple. If Prophet Muhammad ﷺ can prophesy about deviant groups 1400 years after his time, why can't he prophesy about deviant groups 100 or 50 years after his time? Doesn't seem complicated to me. Now let's analyze some more prophecies about Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that were fulfilled after the year 800. Ask yourself this question: is the prophecy about Green Arabia a vague prophecy? No, it's beyond precise. It is beyond counterintuitive. No one would make this prophecy up, and no one would even think about this, which is why this is a massive proof for the truth of Islam. Secondly, let's look at another example. Basically, a time will come when every person will either be consuming interest, or if he is not consuming interest, he will be affected by it. Who could have thought this 1400 years ago? I have actually videos on all of these prophecies explaining why they are massive proofs for truth of Islam. But think about this for a minute. Who would make these prophecies up 1400 years ago? Look at the prophecy about STDs. How could Prophet Muhammad ﷺ have known that as a result of massive immorality, new diseases will spread among people that didn't happen among their ancestors? How could Prophet Muhammad ﷺ have known this? How could Prophet Muhammad ﷺ have known about mobile phones or something similar to them, and talking shoes, this stuff about technology? How could Prophet Muhammad ﷺ have known about abortion? I mean, think about this. These are not vague prophecies, these are precise. No one could have known this stuff 1400 years ago. Not only these are massive proofs for the truth of Islam, these also prove Hadith preservation, and these shred the lies of those two morons. I mean, this isn't something complicated. Think about this. If Prophet Muhammad ﷺ can make precise prophecies of events 1400 years ago after his time, he can make precise prophecies about events 50 to 100 years after his time. So this contention fails, and to be honest, this was the most dishonest and pathetic contention I have seen from those morons, at least till now. Inshallah, I hope you have enjoyed this video. Inshallah, I'll keep refuting these clowns. Till next time, Assalamu alaikum.